Alright everybody, and hello to Vampyr, an action RPG released in June 2018, developed by Don't Not Entertainment and published by Focus Entertainment. And our question here is, why do we talk about that? Why do we deal with that game in particular? Well, according to Steam, the game is about the following. It says, London 1918, you're a newly turned vampire, Dr. Jonathan Reid. As a doctor, you must find a cure to save the city's flu-ravaged citizens. As a vampire, you are cursed to feed on those you vowed to heal. Will you embrace the monster within, survive and fight against vampire hunters, undead skulls, and other supernatural creatures? Use your unholy powers to manipulate and delve into the lives of those around you, to decide who will be your next victim. Struggle to live with your decisions, your actions will save or doom London. So, again the question, why dealing with that? In the context of British studies, obviously it says the location is London, so we do have a clear framework of British studies and taking place in London, of course also the English language as our dominant language of the protagonists and all the NPCs around. And also by the name of the game, Vampyr, we do have representations here of the literally very famous monster of the vampire in the game context. And so our genre is horror. In how far the game is horror or more action RPG, that is still something to be figured out, given that while recording that I'm still in my first reading / playing of the game. What I knew about the game beforehand, so also a reason for choosing that, is that it is very dialogue based. So we do have action scenes and fighting / dying quite a lot, but we do have loads of dialogue, which makes the game on the one hand side extremely slow paced, something that I also continuously say while playing, but with that also giving us loads of texts and social topics to actually analyze. So what we have is the game touches upon culturally and socially relevant topics as the distinction science and religion, topics as war and disease, given that the game takes place in 1918. We have the idea of England, especially London, being a class-based society being tackled, as well as issues as migration and racism, gender roles, and questions of identity. Especially the latter very interesting, given that our protagonist, Dr. Jonathan Reid, is a doctor and a vampire at the same time. So he is something that needs to take lives to exist, while he is also someone whose aim it is to save lives. So the game actually opens up philosophical questions about life and death and about the power over that. However, to give a framework or some limitation here, I have not played the game beforehand, so I had some basic ideas, some framework ideas about the game, but I'm currently in my first playthrough. Whether I really have a playthrough with that, we'll see. So I'm basically in the first reading to get an idea of all the topics covered and how they are covered. Which means, so far, there is not yet any very precise study question for the watching, which will of course be added later. So far, the general question or questions posed is what the game actually starts with, namely the philosophical question of what is a monster? Which is what Jonathan Reid asks himself. So a focus of analysis is what is a monster? What is monstrous? And how is the monster, whatever that may be, and the monstrous, how is that portrayed in the game? And according to the game, what makes a monster from a social perspective, from a cultural perspective, and also from a linguistic perspective? This is in a way the focal points so far, and as said before, all the social topics being touched upon means that you could open up a huge field of different analyses within the game context. Be that war discourse, be it a discourse of disease, which we still know from Corona, be it a discourse about gender roles in the early 20th century, as we have in a hospital setting, who's allowed to be a doctor, who's allowed to be a nurse, or be it gender roles in the tavern, that the one basically owning the tavern is a man, and then all these philosophical questions about, life and death, as I said. So that's so far the orientation in terms of what is our core idea here, and as soon as anything more precise is or has gotten into the focus, I will update you on that, so stay tuned with that. But I hope this helps you to give you some idea of what to focus on.